how do you think the government shutdown, if at all, will have a lesser or more impact on what we're talking about today?
Well, I mean, one huge piece of the shutdown is it meant that the rulemakers aren't working. So, there's a rulemaking agenda, and that rulemaking agenda gets delayed by the shutdown, period, full stop. That is a piece of it. So all of the rules that we're waiting for, and we're waiting for a lot of rules, are delayed. Then we have enforcement. And enforcement goes in both directions. There will be some who say, oh, like we get a reprieve because they're not actively enforcing. That's only partially true. Like, yes, some of the enforcement people aren't at work right now, but then that also creates an enforcement backlog that comes in like a whirlwind when they get back to work. So you have to be prepared for that. What does this mean for me if I'm an employer or, a service provider who's, got concerns relative to enforcement? That pendulum swings in both directions.